Alameda Community Radio. Our government is in a state of shutdown. This radio station is designed to provide you with a voice. Listen to what our government has to say and respond accordingly.
Thank you for calling the White House. Unfortunately, we cannot answer your call today because congressional Democrats are holding government funding, including funding for our troops and other national security priorities, hostage to an unrelated immigration debate. Due to this obstruction, the government is shut down. In the meantime, you can leave a comment for the president at www.whitehouse.gov/contact. We look forward to taking your calls as soon as the government reopens.
Welcome to Voices of Protest, Alameda Community Radio's coverage of the second annual Women's March in downtown Oakland, California.
No humor. I like that one.
We spoke to dozens of protesters involved in the march, our neighbors from near and far.
Hi, I'm Renata. I live in East Oakland, very proudly East Oakland resident.
My name is Holly. I live in Berkeley.
Dana from Oakland.
Allie Jones from Berkeley.
Mishka, and I'm from Alameda.
Michael, I live in Albany, California.
Nora, in Oakland.
Yes, my first name is Carolina, and I live in Oakland.
Juliana, and I live in San Leandro.
My name is Nico, and I was born in Berkeley.
My name is Alice Bynum, and I live in Berkeley.
Victoria, Oakland, California.
Johanna, and I live in Berkeley, California.
My name is Liz Santos.
And where are you from?
I'm from San Francisco.
My name is Erika Marina de Ishel.
And where are you from?
I am from Oakland.
Beautiful.
And my family is from Mexico.
Oh yeah, my name is Tucker, and I'm born and raised in Oakland, California.
Okay, my name is Al, and I'm from Oakland originally. I live in Berkeley now.
Michael, I'm from Berkeley, California.
My name is Lenore, and I'm from Fairfax in Marin County.
My name's Greg, and I'm from Fairfax too.
I'm Samantha, and I come from Washington, D.C.
My name is Sadie, and I come from Oakland, California.
Kim from Oakland, California.
My name is Michelle, and I live in Oakland.
I'm going to use my stage name, which is Barbary Rose, and I live in Oakland, California.
My name's Miriam, and my city is Venice, California, in Los Angeles.
My name is Corinne Dolce, and I'm from Berkeley, California.
I'm Monica Berletti. I live in Kensington.
Kalia.
And where are you from?
San Jose.
All right.
I'm Paul from Alameda.
My first name is Bobby, and I'm from Berkeley.
Michelle Danthin, and the city that I'm in is Oakland.
Trina Richardson, and the city that I'm in is Oakland.
My name is Roselda Nethil.
And what city are you from?
I'm from Oakland, California.
Beautiful.
Passing some people in vest marked Oakland Peace Ambassador. I have a feeling they know where all the bathrooms are.
We asked the people, what inspired you to come out to the protests today? Here's what they said.
I think it's great that a lot of women are starting to speak out, and it's time for our voices to be heard and show that we're not going to stand for what's going on right now. We need to have change.
What brings me out here today is women's rights, women being heard, women finally having a voice, especially from the Me Too and Time's Up. We matter, and we make a difference.
The need to see that you aren't alone, and there's times when you're sitting in your house and you're so overwhelmed and depressed by what you see on television, and then you go out and you see all these positive, amazing women and people and you just don't feel as much like you're alone, and that you can actually have a voice.
I don't see it as so much as a protest. I think it's really just a celebration and a gathering, and a really sort of pulling together the influence and the power and sort of amazingness of all the women that really sort of haven't realized what we have to begin with. So it's really just sort of, I think, starting and coalescing and recognizing who we already are.
What is it about today's protest that inspired us to come out? It's exactly 1 year ago today that we were out here protesting the election. So here we are again with more stuff to protest, I guess.
One of the things that was inspiring last year was the large and diverse sense of resistance and a remarkable level of optimism about that, which after a very painful several months following the election was good to see, and we hope to see that again.
For me, because I'm a kindergarten teacher, my students are inspiring me to be here today.
I think it's cool to see how many people all come out, especially all the little kids, just having everybody together.
The thing that inspires me to come out today is the fact that we are regressing rather than progressing as a society and a country, and I prefer to go forward than backward.
This protest is important because we're going through a very critical point in our history, and we have a man in power who's reckless, and also because women's rights have been undervalued for a very long time. So we need to do something about it. Now I'm here to support the Women's March.
I think we have to have different causes represented throughout this march. Of course, it is about especially combating misogyny against all kinds of people who identify women or who may have vaginas. So we may not be sexually harassed and grabbed at someone else's will. But I think it's also about talking about just immigration, talking about all kinds of ridiculously draconian and anti-human causes that are happening in this current regime. I think I'm here especially to represent queer people, immigrant people, people of color, and all of us whose voices are being silenced right now.
Today's protest is so important. I was here a year ago for the first one, and I'm waiting for my family because I want all my family to know where I stand for freedom for everyone. And that's why I'm here. It's important to show the world that we do stand for freedom, not for hate.
What inspires me to be here today is that I believe there's power in numbers, and I like to be a part of a collective voice sending a clear message to Washington that this is not okay, it's never been okay, and we're going to vote.
Let's see, to get equal rights and to make sure that the world is fair to women and men.
Extreme anger about the direction of the country and, particularly about Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress.
I feel really honored to be in the presence of my community members who want to recognize that our protest has never ended. I remember last year's march being an incredibly moving landmark event in my life, and this year's march feels like the affirmation that continues.
What's inspired me to be here today is the unity and the strength of peaceful protesters and the creativity, as well as the hope that this may lead to something lasting and more permanent and empowering in the midst of so much pain and marginalization.
I just feel like in this current political climate, it's really easy to feel powerless, to feel like you don't have a voice in what's happening in politics at the moment. And it's just very reassuring to be surrounded by people that feel similarly to you. It makes me feel better about the future of our country. It makes me feel better about my fellow Americans and what we can accomplish and what's possible. So just the main reason I'm here is to be surrounded by people that feel similar to me and want to disrupt what's happening in Washington.
Well, what inspired me to come, I came last year for the first march, and I went to the one in San Francisco, and I think it's important for all women and all women of color, of all different perspectives and worldviews to come together and really express our voice, and try to push this movement. It happened last year, it's happening this year, for it to continue. It's something that, it can't stop, it comes from the grassroots. And I think women, are the ones that are really pushing forth many of the issues. And we definitely want more men to be our allies and to come along as well, because we want our society to be more equitable.
Finding my voice and empowerment. I went last year. I was living in St. Paul and marched from the cathedral to the Capitol, and there was a large women of color and indigenous contingent, and we all marched in a large LGBTQA contingent as well, and it was super empowering. And so now I'm back out here back home and wanted to join with my girlfriend and my mom and wreak a little havoc, I guess.
I came out here today for so many reasons. I'm holding a sign here, for the March for Science, which is related to this March for Women, which is related to March for Immigrants and March for Black Lives Matters. I mean, there's so much that's going on with the administration, not specifically the president, but definitely related to the president, that the reasons that I could come out here are almost infinite. But it's absolutely vital that people come out and show that they're not happy with everything that's going on right now at those higher levels and locally as well.
We came out last year, and in my family, we've been coming out and demonstrating. For me, I just like to come out and be counted with the crowd and take up some space and show that I care.
Well, I mean, coming out here, I think a lot of it is we really want to push gender equality, women's reproductive rights, and also just kind of solidarity amongst all the people in the community, to be like, hey, we're all kind of in things together, and your problems are my problems.
We just have to keep protesting this illegitimate occupant of the Oval Office, and we just have to stay strong. I just wanted to be here to say we're still back here a year later. Nothing's changed. We're resisting. Nothing has changed.
Yeah, what she said.
I was inspired to come out today because I'm very angry that families are being separated through deportation policies that don't respect human rights, that women are being disrespected, their bodies are being disrespected, and in particular black trans women are being murdered on a regular basis because our society has given into bigotry and fear because of economic oppression. And so there's a lot of reasons. Yeah.
The reason I'm out here for today's protest is because it's been exactly a year since this corrupt and illegal administration has railroaded our government and our rights, and I'm excited to take it back and be part of it and be encouraged by how many people are with us in that movement.
I'm inspired to come out and protest today because I'm extremely angry about the way that our government has become so severely corrupted. It's been corrupted for a long time, but I think that with this current administration, the corruption is just so blatant and in our face that if we don't stand up and bring our voices out into the streets, we are just accepting fascism.
Well, I'm here with some other sex workers and sex worker allies, and we felt it was really important to be at the Women's March just to show our support and show that we are part of this community as well, because a lot of times feminism excludes sex workers. So we wanted to just be present so people are aware that, we deserve all human rights as well.
I just want to be a voice for humanity, not just women, but every issue that people are bringing up today is so prevalent in what's going on today with our country. And I'm here to support women, not bashing the patriarchy, but also honoring the sacred feminine.
I was so inspired to come out to the protest today because I wanted to get reinvigorated in 2018 for another year of resisting and fighting and making everybody's voices heard in politics and the democratic process. And I came out to the protest today because I get depressed reading the news too much, and it's nice to be filled with the spirit of resisting and womanhood and everyone.
She's also being modest. She's actually an OBGYN up in Highland Hospital.
Oh, yes.
And she is here because she is passionate about making sure women have access to safe health care.
Yes.
That is her #1 priority.
Reproductive rights and also immigrants' rights. I see a lot of undocumented women, and so I'm here today as Lady Liberty to protect the huddled masses and make sure everyone feels safe getting health care here.
So what inspired me is I'm a teacher and I teach high school, and I really want to show my students that you can be a part of the action and you can be a part of the change, and to not be afraid to speak your truth and what is important to you.
Oh, I think there's frustration and anger at our government in particular and its failures, and people want to get out there and be heard.
Oh, well, I'm an old person who cares about the world. I have children and grandchildren, and I care about people who live in underdeveloped countries that are being ignored and denigrated by the president and the administration. I think that we have to resist that and get mobilized to make change.
What inspired me to come out here today was the community that the Women's March brings. I feel when you're in how can I say this? I feel that when there is a cause that people are here are unified against, it's easier to communicate to people, it's easier to approach people, and I feel that it also helps bring or build a type of sisterhood.
We also asked, what changes do you hope to see as a result of these protests?
Well, a lot of changes. So what change would I like to see? That's a hard question to answer succinctly. I'd like there to be, yes, a change in leadership, a change in awareness, a change in practice, just a change to realize that equal rights are essential for women and for everyone.
Well, the change for this protest is already happening. You know, we were already out here in the streets, we're marching, we're putting our voices out here. We've got the young people involved, we've got the elderly involved, we have everyone involved. So the change is already happening, and hopefully it will continue to happen generation after generation, you know, until we see an actual change.
I just more positive energy instead of negative drain, so that people feel like there's a next step.
I mean, I think to just carry that thread and to not have to have, another gathering, to be reminded of that, to just take this into our everyday lives and to continue to build on this energy and this movement and this momentum, because again, we have it. We just need to see it and use it.
What changed? Or what change do we hope to see from this action? This is a very small part of resistance. Resistance has to consist of periodically letting the Republicans and the Trump administration know that this won't work and it won't happen, it has to end. But more importantly than that, it has to involve taking action to retake a democratic government that is a government of the people, and both getting out the votes to make that happen and getting people to understand that policy will be very, very different if that happens. Today is the kind of thing that's really symbolic more than anything else.
Well, what change do I hope to see about this protest? I hope that the elected officials will feel the fire under their feet, that the people aren't going to go away and stop protesting. This is a great turnout, I can tell already today, and the people are still fired up and ready to let their voices be heard.
I'm hoping that this can awaken more people to the movement and to our cause.
I hope that the younger girls get really inspired and more girls go into science. That's my personal goal.
The changes I hope to see today, or as a result of today and days previous that happened, is to hope that they finally listen, because we are loud, we are proud, and we're actually more of the population than they are. So, yeah.
I hope a lot more people will become involved in this year's election. So I hope people will go get registered to vote and get out and vote on election day.
Frankly, I think these protests continue to bring up the dialogue, very important dialogue that we have right now about the rape culture in this country and globally. I think we need to continue the dialogue about consent, and especially as a mom raising a young woman or a young person, they're going to decide what they are going to be when they grow up. It's really crucial that we continue putting pressure and affecting global consciousness around this conversation on violence against women. And so I'm here so we can continue putting pressure and sending the message that we're not going anywhere, and those who think that our bodies can be controlled and abused and frankly jailed, they're not going to win. We are going to resist, and we have male allies, we have young allies, we have elders, we have folks from every single community here, and frankly we're going to continue standing and creating conversations that are about justice and equity.
Change that I would hope to see as a result of these political actions, I think the biggest change is cultural change and how boys are raised, and like raised to be a part of this, like a voice in this movement, not feel like uncomfortable in it, and I don't know, political action seems like the desired outcome, but more so like cultural change and how young boys are raised.
I hope the change will be that more people will realize how important it is to participate in our democracy at every level possible, from demonstrating to voting to getting people in better officials in office, those who stand up for the real America, not for hate, racism, and fascism.
I want to see gerrymandering dismantled. I want to see voter suppression ended, and I want to see the GOP out of power for good.
I hope that we will get a better president and we have a better world in life.
We're taking back both houses of Congress. That's the change we're going to see.
Some of the change that I hope to see is in my students. I teach at Berkeley High School, and I think that it's important for them to see and understand that the work of protesting and political participation is something that adults make a habit of, not just a one-time event.
On a larger scale, I hope that Congress sees this and is motivated to act in response to what the majority, I think, of Americans, or at least women, and other minority groups are voicing. And then I also hope younger generations see this and feel inspired and empowered to take action and be involved politically.
I'm hoping that the amount of people that are marching today here in Oakland, in San Francisco, across the state of California, across this country, can send a message to our politicians, both locally but also in Washington, about what kind of changes that we'd like to make, that we are not happy with the way that our system is being run at the moment. We're not happy with policies that are being enacted, and that we'd like to see change move in the direction of progress rather than moving back in time.
Well, I'm hoping that, you know, especially with the Women's March, to see more women of color coming together and joining. You know, I think many women of color, unfortunately, have been feeling like they can't be a part of this march. You know, they see it more as a white feminist movement, and I really feel like it's important that all women of color join, you know, and for us to become more of a collective group, you know, as women, to march together and bring our voices together.
I'm hoping to see all the issues getting a platform and the ignorance to stop. Like, the ignorance is just overwhelming and astonishing as to what is not spoken about, and not only not what is not spoken about, but how things are dismissed, women's issues and gender issues, and just all of it. One thing I would like to see is, I have a child who identifies as non-gender, non-binary, and I really feel that it's an important time to talk about not only people of color, but people of all genders and identifications, for both gender and sexual identity. It's very important to me because my child is 18 and at school and out in the world, and they need a place and a platform. They need to feel safe, and not women are just not only feeling safe, but our children are not feeling safe.
Probably, what do they call it? The blue wave, the midterms for 2018. We're trying to show people, probably not a lot that's going to change in California, but you look at the number of people that are out here, and you're going to go home and get on the internet and see the amount of people that are in cities all over the country, and there's probably not going to be a lot of change until we start electing people into office, into local office, that represent what all of these 10,000 plus people here are looking for. That's the goal that you want to see, is you start local and you grow to a broader, larger collective.
I hope more people get involved. I hope more people are reading. I hope more people are educating themselves and going to the polls educated with plenty of information. There's a lot out there, and you've got to educate yourself and then vote.
Well, I think the changes we'd like to see as a result of today's political action is more coordination between all of the various groups to stand up against white supremacy and the unjust system that we have in the United States.
What I'd like to see from today's political action is I need that person impeached immediately. It's absolutely unjust. We can't stand by and have our Constitution just trod upon every day. So that's what I'd like to see.
I hope people will come away with a renewed feeling of hope and activism, and that will continue meaningful political action after this march. I think symbolically it's nice for us, and it's a good reminder to people who can't be here that we support them, and otherwise it's good to help us keep going.
This year's protest theme was surrounding voting, so I really hope to see a change in people coming out to the polls, and I hope that our presence as sex workers at the march just inspires people to do some research about who sex workers are and how they can protect sex worker rights with legislation, especially. California just passed, or not California, I'm sorry. San Francisco just passed a really great law that sex workers can now come forward to the police if they've been assaulted at work, and that is a really great legislation that could be spread, worldwide if we get there. So, yeah, that's my hope.
Some changes that I'd love to see: policy change to help support education. I'd also like to see better turnout in the polls. Get people excited about politics and voting for what they believe in and taking part in the process. I'd really love to see policy change that helps support women and people of color and minorities.
I think people need to vote. I think we need to mobilize the vote. We've seen that so far in these special elections when people organize to get out the vote, and I did participate in some letter writing on that. We can make a difference. Alabama was, for everyone, a shocker, and granted, not all the Democrats that get elected are going to be the kind of progressive Democrats I would like. They will be a heck of a lot better than the Republican enablers we have in Congress now.
The changes that I hope to see is that women will have a say-so, that we will stand just as tall as the men, we will make the same amount of money, we will hold the same jobs, and that we will be equal.
And yes, what I want to see change today is that being a founder, an African American woman, I want my voice to be heard. I know what I'm worth, and I want the world to know that I'm worth that. And I don't want any kind of biases from the media to say that I'm not worth my dreams and that I want to be successful. I want women to be successul. I want us to have our voice. I want us to have equality, because it's ridiculous. This is ridiculous. We even talk about in the African American community how we don't stick together, and then now you add a woman on top of that.
now you have whatever it is that the media said about you being a woman. Now you're African American, and then God forbid in somebody's eyes that you're lesbian or transgendered. So I feel like there's so many different levels of the necessity of support. Is that the basis is that we're all people. And with this Women's March, I just hope that people will see that women are women. Yes, we understand that there's a physiologically or difference with, men and women, but just because you're a man doesn't mean that you're able to hold a position in power. I feel like women can do it as well. And it was something that even as simple as recreating the structure with, let's say, traffic. And there was someone that actually died because they had a disability and they took out all of the lights. And it's something as simple as if you were to bring someone that was a woman, they would have been like, okay, well, I'm going to bring it from a woman's standpoint. Somebody who is disabled, hey, look, I don't think this is going to be the best thing that we should do to reconstruct this whole traffic scenario. So if we diversify the people that are in power, I feel like we'll accomplish way more. Because I'm sorry, men don't know about how it feels to have a period. So maybe there should be a room that I can lay down in because I have really bad cramps. I also don't know about urinals, so I cannot sit here and make a law and say, oh, we don't need urinals as women, ban them. So I just hope from this march that, one, that this momentum keeps going, and then I also hope that people just see again that we're all people. Like, let's just take every aspect of people and make the good decisions and make it happen.
Thank you for listening to KACR-LP, Alameda's coverage of the 2018 Women's March.
Welcome to the Dilly Dallies Radio on KACR 96.1 FM. I'm Jen.
And I'm Steve.
And we are the Dilly Dallies. This morning we had the pleasure of chatting with our friend Sagan. Sagan is with a radio show called Radioactive Kids, which is based out of Asheville, North Carolina. You can find his information at ashevillefm.org/show/radio-active-kids. The show airs Saturdays at 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's really early here on the West Coast, but you can also find the podcasts online. He's also on Facebook as well, facebook.com/radioactivekids, AVLFM.
We asked Sagan to submit 3 songs for us to play on our show, and this is the first one. It's called Dreamers by Lard Dog and the Band of Shy. Enjoy.
Let your heart in the door. Give love a chance. Get your booty off the floor. Get up and dance. When you wish upon the moon glow, your smile is gonna fly. Skip the funky moonstone. You can make it if you try. Dream, dream, dreamer. Dream, baby, dream, dream away. You are what you are. Through the stars, to your heart. Dream away, dream away, dream away. Every day. Ingenuity has no limitation. Do your sweet little thing. Drop the imitation. Smile, smiley, smile. And float away your fear. The Countess of Gratitude will wipe away your tear. Dream, dream, dreamer. Dream, baby, dream, dream away. You are what you are. Through the stars to your heart. Dream away. let it go, let it go, let it go.
Zip Curl 5.
Illumination, the devil may care. Sophistication, savoir-faire. Your time is now, the dread is done. Dance in the rain, smile in the sun. Dream, dream, dreamers. Dream, baby, dream, dream away. You are what you are. Blue stars to your heart. Dream away, dream away, dream away. Every day, dream away, dream away, dream away. Every day. Walk the line, take it slow. Take your time, let it go. Dream your life. Dreamers! You are what you are. You are what you are. Dream away, dream away, dream away. Every day. Dream away, dream away, every day. Dream away, dream away, every day. Dream away,
So yeah, we've never done this before.
Yeah, your first interview ever, Sagan, so this is pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's fine. I know. I had a first interview too, and it was kind of weird, but
Well, we figured since the interview we did with you was so relaxed, this is probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. I try to do really relaxed interviews. Like what's the point of being real serious if you're just having fun? You make fun music, you want to have fun conversations.
Yeah, agreed. So let's start by talking about Radioactive Kids, your radio show, which is super cool and really active. There's a lot. You post every song you're playing and on social media, and you seem to know every children's band there is.
Yeah, seriously.
Which is pretty awesome. I actually have discovered a lot of bands just from listening to your show and watching what you're playing.
Yeah.
But can you tell us a little bit about how you got started doing a show for kids?
Sure. So let's see. I don't know if I told you this, but I'm actually 19 years old.
Wow.
Wow, no, you didn't tell us that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I grew up, listening to really good kids music like Dan Zanes and Lori Berkner and etc. So I never really stopped listening to really good kids music.
Yeah.
And so a guy by the name of Tim Aram had the show before me, and I just randomly met him one day, and he invited me on, and we kept getting more and more involved, and I eventually took over the show.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And it's been great ever since.
So you're in school right now then. Are you studying to be like a radio DJ, or like what are you doing in school?
Well, I'm actually studying to be a librarian.
Oh, very
nice.
cool.
We love librarians.
Yeah, we do.
Of course. Yeah. I think like pretty much every indie artist loves librarians because they perform in libraries.
Yeah, totally.
We just did a library show 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. And I'm sure it was amazing.
Thank you.
It actually was. It was really fun.
It was a really fun
Libraries are a really great place.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and of course I'm hoping to channel that energy when I finish school. But I'm also hoping to stay involved in radio and maybe have that as a second career.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you meet the guy that you said was doing the show before you? How did you guys meet?
Let's see. We were I was with my brothers after the Christmas parade in Asheville, North Carolina, and I vaguely knew about his show before then, but I never really listened to it. And he just happened to have a booth at the festival after the parade, and I just randomly came up and started talking to him and found out he was the guy who had the radio show. And he said, "Hey, you want to come on? It seems like you know a lot about his music."
Yeah, totally. That sounds pretty organic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was that your first? That was your first foray into radio?
Yes. Yeah. And he trained me completely and everything. And the station that I'm on is also a community radio station, just like your station.
Right. Exactly.
Which makes it so much better because you can do so much more. You have a lot of freedom in what you can play and how you put shows together. There's no big corporation telling you what to do.
Yeah, definitely. Now, you do your show once a week, correct?
Yes.
And you do it live, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, for me, the most fun way to do it.
Yeah, that sounds...
it sounds terrifying to me.
For us, it sounds terrifying. We will be up front. We pre-record our show and put it together and submit it to the radio station. It's a new station, so that's how they're running it. But doing it live every week, that's pretty awesome to be able to do that. And you definitely have to have knowledge of what your kids' music if you're going to do an hour show every week.
Yeah.
And I just kind of gather all the music because he had Tim Aram, the guy who I took over the show from, had a large collection of kids' music, so he gave that collection to me. So I already had a big collection to start off of.
Yeah.
Right. And I suppose you get pretty much every children's artist sending you their new releases all year.
Mostly. I even look on Bandcamp for other stuff from different countries, which is cool.
Oh yeah, that is really cool.
We're going to take a break on the interview and play the second song selection from Sagan. It is called 3 Minutes Till Summer by Alex Volts, and it's from his album Welcome to Awesome Town, and it is exactly 3 minutes. Enjoy.
The sun is high, the sky is blue, the barbecue be calling you, the swimming pool is awfully cool, and you ain't got homework to do. Oh, diggity dog, life is gonna be sweet. Just as soon as I hear fine old school bell ring. Yeah. I got 3 minutes to summer, 3 minutes to everything right. 3 minutes to summer. Now I'm just staring at the clock. I said I'm just staring at the clock. It's got me like tick tock, tick tock, tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Whoa! I'm gonna play the day away, and then I just can't wait to stay up late. Our bicycles will rule the park, and then some popsicles will cool us off. Ooh, diggity dog, life is gonna be sweet. Just as soon as I hear the years, fine old school bell ring. But I still got 2 minutes to summer. 2 minutes to everything. 2 minutes to summer. Now I'm still staring at the clock. I said, oh, I'm still staring at the clock. It's got me like tick tock, tick tock, tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Wow! Fireflies, 1 minute to summer, just 1 minute to everything.
And now back to our interview with Sagan Thacker from Radioactive Kids.
So I assume you still listen to children's music yourself. If you're doing all of that research, you're obviously listening to it. But do you have other genres that you are partial to or that you listen to and enjoy?
Yes, I like everything. I mean, every single genre has at least one artist that is really loving what they're doing and really making good art. I mean, I like everything from punk to bluegrass. I mean, you name it, it's there.
That's cool.
In my listening realm.
Do you have any favorites that you would like to share with us?
Let's see. Geez, right now, we're really into Clipping, which is a hip hop, like a space hip hop band. I don't know if they have any songs that are kid appropriate,
Right.
but they're a really great group.
Cool. You know, when we were searching for more information about Radioactive Kids, I believe we found it. Speaking of bands from another country, wasn't there a band called Radioactive Kids? It was like a surf rock band.
Oh yeah.
And
And I've found them before, and I haven't gotten around to listening to their stuff like this to see if there's anything good that I could play on the show. But that'd be really cool.
Yeah, well, it was funny because I was like, hey, there's a band, and then I started playing it, and I'm a drummer in a surf rock band. And that band is called Aloha Screwdriver. And so when I was listening to this band, I was like, wait, these guys are really good. They're like surf, rockabilly, punk.
Yeah, they were pretty good.
They're really good.
Awesome, yeah. And I don't know. I think maybe now I'll have to try and find some of their music and listen to it, see if anything's good for the show.
Yeah, because instrumental surf music, especially if it's instrumental, I mean, why couldn't it be children's music,
Totally.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kids like to rock out,
I know
too.
there are a couple albums of mostly instrumental kids music out there that are really good.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what can you tell us, like, what's your favorite part of doing radio?
Wow, probably the whole community with all the artists, because the whole Kindy community is like everybody really works together and supports everyone else, and it's really cool to be involved with all sorts of cool people from around the world.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really cool, and playing in a children's band and also in some other rock bands. I know that sometimes the rock bands get really competitive, or bands generally can get really competitive. But it is nice to have children's band handing each other gigs and saying, hey, I can't play this one, but can you play that gig? And it's really just wanting to get music to the children, no matter what.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's all about the art. It's not about making money or like hitting the number one song on the chart. It's about making good art.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely. You should try musical theater if you don't like competition. Totally kidding. Totally kidding. It's worse in musical theater than anywhere I've ever seen. So
that's great.
So I'm going to make the assumption that you do not have children yourself, because that was one of our questions for you, Sagan.
No.
Now that we know that you're 19.
No. Yes. I do not have kids.
So you're usually on the other side of the mic as the interviewer, and today you are the interviewee. So I'm going to bombard you with this one question. If you could ask yourself one question as an interviewer, what would it be?
That is a tough one. We're going to have to think on that a little bit. Let's see. Yeah, well, I'm not really sure. Let's see. You've kind of...
I stumped you. Yes.
Yeah, you put me on the spot right there.
Yeah. You can think about it. You can think about it. But while you think about it...
can you tell us... Okay, so we asked you to submit three songs that you liked and you want to hear on our show, and we're definitely playing those 3 songs. Can you tell us a little bit about why you picked those 3 songs? Do you remember what they are?
Sure. I think they're, let's see, 3 Minutes Till Summer by Alex Volts.
Yeah.
And then Pretend by Cleveland Davis.
Yep.
And Dreamers by Lard Dog.
Yep,
good memory.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and let's see. let's see, Alex Volts. He's a really cool guy because he just started making kids music for his nieces like a couple years ago, and he started in like a metal band, but then he started making kids music with the metal band, and now he's done 3 kids music albums. And the last 2 have been all him making the music.
Right.
And I think they're like really cool, like pop music with like all sorts of crazy sounds, and he writes songs about cool things. And the song I picked, 3 Minutes Till Summer, it just happens to be exactly 3 minutes long. Did you notice that?
Yeah, no, we didn't. I don't think we did notice that.
No, we didn't.
And when I interviewed him earlier this year, he said that was a complete accident. He did not mean for it to be 3 minutes long. It just happened to be that long.
Oh, that's funny.
I know, it's like, like the best
go ahead.
thing an artist can have.
Yeah, that's pretty
totally.
awesome. He also has a pretty weird song about dead squirrels on that
He has
album.
some weird songs.
Yeah, he records with his nieces, and they're like, like he just like his niece starts singing a song about dead squirrels, and he's like, oh, okay, I'll just make this into a song.
Oh man. Yeah, that's so. Yeah. So I guess all of the bands that you chose to play for us, they all sort of have a very common sound to them, all mostly male. I mean, I know Lard Dog and the Band of Shy, I believe they had a female vocalist as well. But but lead male vocalists that have like kind of a raspy kind of voice. So I'm thinking you might have a type that you like more so.
I didn't even notice that. I mean, I didn't even really notice that I picked the similar, I guess, type of vocalist. I was just like going through like some of my favorite music from this year. I was like, how about this? How about this? How about this?
Yeah, and they're all very creative. We enjoyed the songs for sure.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't really think about that.
So we're at like 13 minutes now, so I'm going to ask you one more question. Okay. Can you, so at the end of our show, we do the section called Random Topics that are submitted by children. And
though you're no longer a child,
right?
We were curious if you had any random topics that you thought we should discuss on our radio show.
That's right. What would you like us to talk about at the end of our show?
Ooh, how about this is like super random. How about bridges made out of vines?
Whoa!
Bridges? Whoa!
Because I know there are several in Asia, like they're actual bridges that people have made out of vines, and you can walk over them.
Oh,
really?
Well, now see, we're going to have to look that up.
I know,
That's
we're going to have to Google that now and do a little bit of research.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'll put you on the spot one more time and ask you if you had thought of a question that you might ask yourself if you were interviewing yourself.
Let's see. So,
or
what I might ask myself is maybe how long would you continue doing this and staying involved in kids music?
Great question.
Yeah, don't answer it though.
No.
We want the audience to be like, man, I wish I knew the answer to that question.
No, please, I want to know. I want to know.
All right. Yeah. I think I'm going to stay involved as long as possible.
Great.
Just and like I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep doing this show my entire life, but I'm going to do it as much as I possibly can because it's so much fun.
Cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I think that you're really good at it too. So we've enjoyed our little conversations with you and engaging with you, and so yeah, I hope that you do it as long as you can.
Yeah, and your show is called Radioactive Kids out of Asheville, North Carolina. Can you tell us what time it's on, Sagan?
Okay, it's from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern time, which of course is like super early there in California.
Yeah.
But you can listen to it anytime online.
Right, on the website, right?
And what is the website again?
Asheville FM, ASHEVILLE FM.org radio-active-kids.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Sagan. It's been really nice chatting with you.
All right. Thank you. I certainly enjoy listening to your radio show, and I hope you keep on doing it. I think you're doing good stuff there.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And here is Sagan's final song selection for our show. It's called And Then Pretend by Kleb and Davis.
Pretend that we live in a little log cabin, and then pretend that I turn into a goblin. And then pretend that I have the medicine to turn your back, but I'm allergic to it. And then pretend that it doesn't even matter, because I am not a goblin that is bad. Oh no, I'm a goblin that is good. Oh yeah. And then pretend that Davis turns into Freddie Johnson. Freddie Johnson. And then pretend that Cleve jumps off the cliff. And then pretend that I grow wings out of my butt and fly away into a van. And then pretend that you drive into the ocean and you throw a grenade at a shark. And then pretend it explodes into a thousand little sharks. And then pretend that I fly a helicopter and rescue me from the sharks. You are saved by Freddie Johnson. And then pretend that both of you go back to the cabin, the little log cabin. And then pretend you eat pineapples all night long. With this skin on it. I like the skin. And then pretend there's a volcano. And then pretend there's a tornado. And then pretend there is an earthquake inside of a flood. A flood. And then pretend there is a hurricane. And then pretend there is a airplane crash. And then pretend there is a avalanche of mud. People call it a mudslide.
Today's topic was given to us by Sagan Thacker himself, and it is bridges made out of vines. Yes, Maeve, do you like those too?
Yeah, bridges made out of vines was something I'd never heard of.
Me neither. But actually, when we started researching it, they looked familiar.
Yes.
Apparently, they're fairly common in the West Iya Valley in Japan. Again, just so you know, we might be mispronouncing some of these words. So, and Meghalaya, or Meghalaha, India.
In India, yeah.
And the ones in Japan, they have to be remade every 3 years. They let them grow across the water, and then they take them and they sort of wrap them.
Yeah, they're made from wisteria vines that they grow to oversize on either side of the river, and then they they wave them together until they put planks in them about 12 inches apart, and they make a bridge out of it.
12 inches. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the ones in India, they call them live bridges because they're actually living roots from plants, and some of them are over 500 years old. It's totally nuts.
Yeah, they grow them and make a bridge out of them. Wow. It takes years to build a bridge.
Yeah, they said some of them it takes up to 15 years for them to be fully functionable.
It's pretty crazy.
Pretty crazy. I think I'm going to build one in my backyard. Yeah, I have the lagoon in my backyard here in Alameda, so I'm just going to
start building it.
I'm going to build a bridge.
Just tell your neighbors, don't worry about what I'm doing. In 20 years, there'll be an amazing vine bridge.
Yeah, totally. Maeve wants to talk about the bridges too. What do you have to say, Maeve?
Do you have anything to say?
Nothing. Silent now.
Maeve's like, play some music for me.
You got it, Maeve.
Okay. Have a great day.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Alameda Community Radio on KACR 96.1 FM. We are the Dilly Dallies. I'm Jen.
And I'm Steve.
And we will see you next time.
Hey Alameda, you've got that dial tuned to KACR-LP. Alameda, this is 96.1 FM, Alameda's community radio station. Stay tuned for more local, original, community programming. We bring you talk, music, politics, and more right here on KACR-LP, Alameda. This is Alameda's community radio station. Follow us online on Facebook and Instagram, or visit alamedacommunityradio.org for more information on how you can get involved or donate. Alameda Community Radio is volunteer-run community organization that you can get involved in. Email programming at alamedacommunityradio.org for more information. This is KACR-LP, Alameda 96.1 FM.
Thank you so very much for joining me. My name is B.W. Ellis. I'll be your host this evening. I've got a great show for you. First off, I want to thank KACR-LP Alameda, Alameda's community radio, for giving me the opportunity to have my show every week. But in that same breath, I must say that the views expressed on this show are not those of KACR Alameda Community Radio, its officers or employees. No, these views are mine, and I hope they will become yours. This evening we're going to have a conversation about the legal battle here in California, and especially on the island here in Alameda, around cannabis sale, cultivation, distribution, all of the wonderful things that you get to talk about when you're not worried about something looking over your shoulder. All the things you get to talk about when you talk like an atheist. Good evening and welcome. Once again, my name is B.W. Ellis and you're listening to Talk Like an Atheist. On today's show, we have a very special guest. We're going to be speaking with Sharon Golden of the Alameda Island Cannabis Community. She's an activist and ardent supporter of the new law in California legalizing recreational use of marijuana. But first, I wanted to talk to everybody about what I do at the beginning of all my shows, about giving. See, something about being a humanist means that we care about our fellow humans. We care about what happens to them because we know that there isn't somebody else that's going to come along and do it for us. So give. Find a place to give your time. Find a charity to give your money. Heck, find a service to donate your blood. Anything. It's the humanist thing to do. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to one of the leading advocates for cannabis cultivation and distribution in our fair island. All right, let me introduce Sharon Golden. Sharon has been an Alameda resident for 20 years. She received a bachelor's degree in American Studies from UC Berkeley, focusing on the politics of regulation and healthcare. She has spent the last 12 years in the cannabis industry, worked on AB 266 as a cannabis worker consultant, and advocated for workers' issues and consumer safety. She recently founded Alameda Island Cannabis Community, or AICC, a nonprofit community group working to lift the ban on cannabis cultivation and dispensaries, creating sensible regulations for cannabis businesses in Alameda. She's been an active in community involvement for over 20 years
and the last 16 years here in Alameda. Hello, Sharon. Thank you for coming on Talk Like an Atheist.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
Not a problem. So, let's just get started off with where you're coming from. What got you interested in cannabis as a focus for activism? And, I guess what I'm asking is, was it the healthcare benefits? Was it the inequities in the criminal justice system, or just an ardent belief in the personal freedom of Americans to use the mind-altering substances of their choice? What brought you in?
Well, a little bit of all of those things, right? When I graduated high school, we were kind of in the middle of the economic downturn. I graduated in 2005. I know that there was a housing crisis in 2008, but there was a lot of job issues that were going on.
Certainly.
Yeah, and really, I started in cannabis. It was starting wage was $15 an hour. I had full medical, dental, vision, so that was really attractive. But in addition to that, I had already been to a rally with Americans for Safe Access when I was in high school, and there's a lot of really sick patients that are out there that can't really stand up and have their own voice. Literally, like it's harder for them to be at these city council meetings until 2 a.m.
Right.
So I felt like we needed to have support them, as an able-bodied person. I needed to support them, and then I've had anxiety my whole life, really, and I was prescribed a lot of Xanax, just to kind of put it out there. So cannabis was a great option for me, and being that my situation was only anxiety, I felt like I had enough mobility to be able to speak up for those people that had less.
It also kind of brings into sharp relief where the injustices really lie in that, because here you have a substance naturally occurring. It's not something that's been chemically produced, really. I mean, now we're starting to see some more science involved into it. But you see this substance that helps so many people around the world, but because of our political, craziness, we've decided that this substance doesn't get to be administered.
Yeah, and I mean, even more so than that, originally we were kind of talking briefly before this show even started about like the history, and it really is rooted in Harry Anslinger and the rise of the American Medical Association, right? And the stronghold that they had over doctors in that time. I delved a little bit in my senior thesis about how there was tinctures that were available in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
See the old packages, yeah.
Yeah, but they were really kind of inconsistent. Right, and at the time, medical doctors were trying to develop dosages, and basically, they pushed out the tinctures, right? These tinctures, because they weren't necessarily all evenly dosed, kind of very similar to what we see now. And we're working on regulating those things. So the basis for that is a little bit more than just political. It is very political, but then the stigmas that they had used to propagandize their position is just long lasting, right? Reefer madness.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I want to get back around to that particular part of the conversation, because there's a lot of really it's almost diabolical history here in California, and how we were the place where a lot of that propaganda occurred. So I want to double back on that, of course, but what I'm concerned with within the discussion that you're talking about here, one of the reasons why you make something legal, where you decriminalize it, is to put it into the white market as opposed to the black market, where you have dosages that are properly meted out, where you have labeling requirements that tell people what it is that they have. This is one of the reasons why alcohol consumption, while many consider a social ill, isn't as devastating as it could be, because we know the difference between something that's 10% alcohol and 40% alcohol. And we know what that's going to do to us.
Yeah, and that's really important. That's what really has been kind of going on this legislative session up in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. I think that especially when it comes to edibles, the inconsistency from product to product is a huge issue.
Right.
It's even if that product, like take a candy bar for instance, and that candy bar producer produces the same thing, and they are making sure to test it and be very make sure that their dosages is right. The next candy bar over might have a completely different dosage, and that kind of can be a little bit risky, especially for a lot of the people that are entering into that are now interested in using cannabis as medicine, because when they're now that it's being destigmatized, we've got a lot of new people coming in, not just elderly people, but people that have never really thought about this, and it's really hard for them to kind of go into a dispensary and not over medicate sometimes, right? Like they might be really unfamiliar and think, hey, you know, I've smoked before, so I can have 150 milligrams of cannabis, an edible that is 150 milligrams, and that can definitely lead to an increase if emergency room visits, just because they're on a ride and they don't want to get off. There's nothing really wrong with them, but they're just like, oh my gosh. And so I see that the regulations that just came out at the state level, we're going to have 100 milligrams per package maximum, and everything's got to be scored at 10 milligrams, which is a pretty conservative dose. I always recommended as a bud tender when people came in to start off at like 10 or 15 milligrams and kind of, you know,
work your way up from there.
Yeah, because, you know, you can always eat more. You can't really eat less.
Right. Once it's in your system, it's there.
And it's not a pleasant feeling. I mean, I'm not saying that they're definitely at a health risk, but, you know, we've all had a little bit too much to drink or maybe a little bit too much to eat, and it's not necessarily the most great experience.
Well, with food, you don't really have the same considerations in that it might kill you. With alcohol, yes, you could die from alcohol poisoning, but there has yet to be, I mean, we should say this to be responsible to our own side of the argument, we should say that there has never been a recorded case of death from marijuana overdose.
Not at all, yeah. No, definitely there hasn't been. It's more of that unpleasant experience that drives people in there, and most of the time, nurses, you know, just get them some candy from the vending machine, get them some water, and sit them down. They're just, you know, they feel safer because we are a product of the Western medical paradigm. We all feel like we'll be better, made better by the nurses. So, I mean, it is, you know, I don't want to say it's funny at all, because if you've had that experience, it's
nothing to laugh at.
Yeah.
But, you know, most of the time it's just a matter of just, you know, sleep it off and you'll be fine.
Exactly. And so I do want to kind of at least make sure that I differentiate. This is not like alcohol. I mean, eating too much is not going to, you know, it's not a health risk. Like, you know, alcohol poisoning is clearly a huge issue.
And there's also a concern that I have just for a good amount of time. My wife and I worked at different Renaissance fairs and Scottish Highland Games, all sorts of outdoor events. And the big consideration whenever we would be at these things was food and food safety. Because you're talking about some fairly irregular practices in cooking at these places, whether it's the deep fat fryer, it's the barbecue with the chicken leg, the turkey legs. There's all this stuff going on. So when I look at the edibles, the discussion around edibles, I'm wondering at what the food safety requirements of handling cannabis are and whether those are being addressed.
Yeah, they definitely are. So basically in Sacramento, they just came out with the emergency regulations about a week and a half ago. And so these are going to be the regulations that the state is going to be working with for the next 360 days. They last for 6 months, and we already know that they are planning for sure to renew them so that they have enough time to really get the full regulations rolled out. And they're definitely addressing, and they're referring you to health and safety codes, especially with the kitchens. They're going to be inspected, and right now they're not so much, right? People are a little bit nervous about inviting public health inspectors into their facility because, I mean, up until this point, because of the, illegality, if you will, right? They're not permitted, they're not licensed by the state, so people are nervous. I mean, and now we're looking and we're seeing that they are getting permitted, and people, now that they're being acknowledged by the city, are less worried about health and safety calling the police, say, right? And, and that's been a huge concern. And I think that's one of the great things about regulation, right? Now that they're not at risk of going to jail, we can be sure that they're actually producing products that are up to health and safety code in terms of...
Another benefit of bringing it out of the black market.
Exactly. And so they have a lot of different edible manufacturers are definitely turned on their head a little bit, right? Because of the scoring of the 10 milligrams. But I think a lot of them have been trying to do their best to uphold health and safety. I mean, I'm not a cook, so I have no idea really what I'm talking. I'm horrible. I burn everything. So, but I do know that they're definitely moving into that direction, and they're going to be held to the same standards as somebody who's making regular chocolate bars or regular pastries.
Sure. There are two other points that I want to bring about, discuss real quick about the regulation before I move on to different aspects of this conversation. The first, and this is a concern that the community usually has towards cannabis production, is how do you keep it out of the hands of children? Especially when you're talking about things that are candy. I mean, their packaging, the presentation of them is very much up to date with the marketing that we see at our local corner store of all the different types of gum and chocolate bar and all that. It's the same type of packaging. If you put two of them side by side next to each other and show them to a kid, the kid's not going to know which one's the dangerous one.
Yeah, and this is another thing that's been addressed by the state regulation. So there's not allowed to be any, gummy bears, right? People that have currently, this is why it said it's kind of being turned upside down, because some people's business model or their products that they were producing are now illegal. Another thing that it may or may not be illegal is having cotton candy. And there are some people that produce only cotton candy, and now they're like, I don't know if this is allowed. And packaging requirements for edibles now have to be opaque, so you can't see through the packaging. And so there's different things to where it will look a little bit different, or at least that kid won't notice that it won't look the same side by side. It cannot be a see-through package, so that will make it less attractive.
I'm just trying to remember. I don't know of any candies except for like the Golden Bear gummy bear bags and that type of bag section, like Reese's peanut butter cups and Snickers, and none of those are clear. All of them are foil.
Oh, yeah. None of those are see-through, but I mean, now no edibles are going to be see-through. And in terms of like packaging that looks similar to, I mean, we Tainted Edibles, right, was around. I mean, I used to work for them like 10 years ago now. And, they had the Keef Cats, they had the 420 grand bars, and their packaging looked really similar. And, I think it's Mars came after them a little bit and was like, hey, you can't do this. So some of this is going to be state regulations of how this packaging looks, and others going to be if it looks too similar to another package.
It'll be the resolution of the capitalistic marketplace going through the
coming after you, and it's
the legal system's going to catch you on that one.
Exactly. So we saw that well before the state regulations already. I mean, I believe Mars had sent Tainted a cease and desist. So we will definitely probably see more of that if it's too similar. And I'm anticipating that this is going to be something that actually really impacts a lot of different businesses in ways that they might not even understand yet.
And the second point I want to bring up before we move on, the consideration of the business end itself, the largest consideration that I have noticed in reporting on this and cutting together documentaries on it and just being a medical marijuana patient myself is the financial side of it, because a lot of these organizations that are distributing these things can't use credit cards. The banking laws are extremely dysfunctional for this change. It's like, okay, we've changed the regulation concerning the product itself, but because after, 9 decades of prohibition of one form or another, whether it be the Harrison Narcotics Act of 1918 or the Marijuana Tax Act stamp of 1937, or what happened after Timothy O'Leary did his trip across the Texas border, you've got all of these different laws and regulations flying everywhere, and the tightest ones have to do with the financial side. How is the state dealing with that?
Well, there's been chit-chat about starting a state bank, right? A state-run public bank. And Oakland is currently also looking into starting a public bank too. This has been floated around at the state level, but instead of them actually tackling this issue, they just bought money counters for all of the all the places where you have to turn in your taxes. The name's escaping me right now, but it seems like they're just kind of skirting that way. And I think that they're going to try to rely on a public bank at the city level. I think that also Los Angeles has been talking about it as well.
Well, Senator Warren suggested a couple years back making United States Postal Service into a banking resource as well. So that conversation is happening on the federal level. I'd never heard of it being accounting or being applied to something like marijuana sales and distribution and the proceeds that come off of that. Because right now it's mostly a cash business, almost, cash or ATM from the consumer standpoint.
Yeah, and I mean it's still the same way for the business owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually a really nuanced situation in general. I mean, when I started, I was paid in check, right? We had Bank of California, or that was the name of the bank, Bank of California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, one day I was paid in cash, and I was like, wow, okay, like and I mean, I have to just kind of comment on that because there's certain kind of businesses that you get paid in cash and only on cash, and it was wow, I thought that I was doing something really great, but now I'm being relegated into this black market type sphere. Even though it was cannabis, medical cannabis was legal here. So that's really interesting, and I think that the best way is probably going to be getting these public banks open, and then at the federal level, 280E is a tax code which basically prohibits cannabis businesses from writing off any materials, any pens, paper, anything. So
your business expenses are no longer write-offs, so you're getting taxed on them.
Exactly. And that's another huge thing. I mean, and we're not only are you getting taxed on those, but now we're going to be paying a lot of more money in taxes than we were. I mean, I'm definitely for taxing cannabis businesses, but I do think that there should be some kind of discourse on how much we can't write off on that end, and how much we're still being taxed on this end. So in terms of like the state taxes and the local taxes, I mean, for adult use, we're looking at potentially 25% taxes that the consumer is going to see. So for your $60 eighth now,
you're paying $75.
And we already see that in San Jose. They've already been doing that on their medical use. So that's that. And it's something that definitely needs to be brought up. Us as an industry are planning on going full-fledged next year and trying to address this cash-only issue. I think that the cash-only issue is a worker safety issue.
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, if I leave with my paycheck, and one time I did lose my paycheck on my way to my car. I mean, that happens, and most of the time you can just get a new check written out, but then I volunteered for a cannabis dispensary for two weeks, essentially, because I lost my paycheck. And they were a little bit understanding, and they definitely helped me out a little bit, but they did not cut me a new check, and I was out that money. So I mean, there's nothing that we can really do. So I think that it's an issue that when we talk about the banking for these business owners, that I think a lot of people understand. They don't realize how this is actually affecting a worker as well.
Sure.
And you could be targeted. I mean, if it, I don't want to say that something bad has happened, but I do get nervous walking to my car after I got my paid, right? I mean, I could literally once again get robbed, and then now I'm out my paycheck. So, and I don't necessarily think that that's ever happened, but it is something that's a little bit nerve-wracking.
Well, in my mind's eye, that kind of falls into the reason why we have drunk driving laws. It may happen, may not happen, but it's too great a risk. And so in order to abdicate that risk, we prohibit them. So moving on to a topic we brushed on earlier, the propaganda involved in the entire discussion concerning cannabis. I don't know what our listeners may know, may not know, but the background on it most definitely hinges around this one guy, Harry Encinal. He was a federal agent, a G-man, back when G-man was the appropriate term, and he brought into America this ideology of the negative stereotypes surrounding the use of marijuana. In fact, the term marijuana actually isn't the name of the plant. It's cannabis sativa. That's why I've been trying to call it cannabis as much as possible. But the word marijuana is actually a derogatory term from Mexico that was brought up. And the reason earlier I said that we here in California were the brunt of it was because of his partnership with the William Randolph Hearst newspaper group, the Argosy newspaper group. We're talking 26 papers, up and down the Pacific Coast. And I guess what I found kind of perplexing was, why would a newspaper guy be interested? What was his dig, until I did a little research and realized he owned wood pulp paper mills all along the Pacific Coast, and he didn't want to have to pay to convert them to hemp paper mills. And hemp, a close cousin to cannabis, is a far superior method for making paper.
Definitely, because trees take forever to grow, and hemp really can get very tall and very
fast. It's a weed.
Yeah.
They call it a weed. And so you have 1 acre that takes 25 years to produce a forest on. that you would then cut down and turn into wood pulp paper, that same acre can yield 4 crops per year of hemp. And those 4 crops in a year produce as much paper as the trees, as the forest. So we're looking at something that is obviously a no-duh. It's obviously something that could extremely aid our fight against climate change because of all the alternative uses. Where is the state on hemp legalization?
Well, I think that, there's actually, that's very much not a part of the conversation still, right?
That. Yeah.
It's really, really not. And, there is some localities where I've, because I do attend not just Alameda City Council meetings, but,
sure.
I'm all over the state at Board of Supervisor meetings and other kinds of city council meetings. And you'll be surprised how little this conversation even is raised. There is a couple different people that even at there was the very first cannabis advisory board meeting for the state, and one person brought up the fact that I want to be able to cultivate hemp, and it was it was just a comment and no response, right? I mean,
Right.
There's not ever dialogue during these public comment periods, and it's something that definitely needs to be looked at a lot more. I mean, in for every reason that you just said, right? The amount of land that it takes to produce some paper is absolutely ridiculous. And as much as we're moving to there's still, electronic paper and emails and stuff, it's still really needed. We need to still be submitting a lot of different things via check and other things. So I think it's really important to make sure that this discussion regarding hemp does not go under the radar with everything else that they're looking at. And I understand the state has a lot on their plate. They're trying to regulate a full-fledged industry. They waited a little bit too long to do it, and I think they've been doing really an amazing job. But hemp has been largely, ignored, and I don't know if there's as much of a capital interest as it was with Hearst, right? I mean, that was clearly a capitalism, power grab. I mean, to protect his own investments, and I don't know if that's really the case right now. I think that they're more focusing on regulating medical and adult use of cannabis with THC in it. So that's more what they're trying to do. They have more of a public safety driving force factor than the economic and environmental aspects that they could easily be also working on.
It never ceases to amaze me that when doing something for the public good, we can't walk and chew gum at the same time. Yet when we want to do something stupid, we're juggling the balls, we're walking the tightrope, and we're chewing gum.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we're willing to take on all of this extra workload when it's doing the wrong thing for bad reasons versus the right thing that's difficult for better reasons.
Yeah, and I would like to point out too, I mean, you probably could go, I mean, if you have enough land, I mean, clearly in, Alameda, we might not have anybody who's wishing to cultivate hemp, but there is some localities that may be open to doing that, and I think that that's going to be more at the county level, right? Maybe somebody in Trinity County wants to do that. However, it doesn't seem like there is a state license type for cultivating hemp. There is a state license type for cultivating cannabis sativa.
Well, I guess there's two thoughts that I have on that one. First off, at least the way it should be in a government that's structured the way that ours is, something is legal until it's made illegal. And if hemp was never specifically made illegal, and it was made illegal by association to cannabis, and cannabis is now legal for cultivation, therefore, hemp should be legal.
I definitely agree.
That seems like the law solves itself in that regard because, I mean, and I don't know enough about the law to say whether or not hemp was ever called out as a separate entity to cannabis in that legal discussion. The other thought I have is maybe Alameda doesn't have the real estate to handle cultivation, although I think there's plenty of space out on the point that's currently undeveloped that you could break up that concrete and turn it into something. But also just in the way of biotech. This is a plant that has been unstudied for centuries, at least since the scientific revolution. We have not broken down its DNA. We have not turned into all the different variants that we know are possible because of our cultivation of its close cousin, cannabis, but also just in general. We haven't applied modern technology to the cultivation, industrial application, and distribution of this stuff. So how do we know? And it seems like that's a space Alameda could host if it was forward thinking enough.
Yeah, research is definitely, we're lagging on that. But there is other countries that have been doing research. I mean, the status, the Schedule 1 status by the DEA it's definitely holding back funding for grants and getting the grants approved, or even getting the project approved by a university.
And to kind of give our listeners a bit of a heads up, Schedule 1 involves the scheduling system for narcotics at the federal level.
Yes.
And when you have, I think, 5 different levels of scheduling, and the top level, or Schedule 1, is where a substance has a high addictive quality and no medical application or value.
No accepted medical value. Yeah.
Right. So it's obvious to anybody who has even taken a cursory look at cannabis from a scientific perspective that it doesn't qualify for Schedule 1 at all. And that qualification in and of itself is part of the propaganda.
Yeah, and I wish I could recall this right now, but there's a lot of drugs that that we would probably likely, and hopefully the listeners too, would consider a lot more dangerous that are actually Scheduled 2, right?
Cocaine, one of them, because it has a medical use.
It does have medical use.
Opiates.
And I mean, but they're highly, highly, highly addictive.
Yes.
And so I do think that
and people die from them on a regular basis.
Especially with the opiate crisis right now, right?
Yes.
I mean, and that's opening up a huge can of worms, and I don't think that we have time for today. But we got to kind of like take note of what's going on at the federal level. I mean, there's been some talk. Bernie Sanders, in 2015, I believe, he did push for. He had entered a bill to reschedule cannabis, and this conversation's actually going on at the federal level. There's a cannabis caucus at the federal level right now.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
I know, right? So we're working on it. And I had briefly mentioned Americans for Safe Access, which is how I started in the industry. And their headquarters used to be here in Oakland, and they moved to DC. Oh man,
for
like 8 years.
Reasons.
Yeah, 8 years ago, and they've been really focusing on the federal policy, because I mean, a lot of their heavy lifting was done here in California. So. Yeah,
we're leading the way. I mean, and this is, I guess, touting our state a little bit. California is 10% of the U.S. population. Right now, the United States is ranked it's first in the world as economies. California alone is 6th. If California left the Union, if you subtracted California from the United States would drop to number 26, and California would go up to number 5.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a very, very important state to the Union, and so the example that we're setting on all these laws, both good and bad. I mean, the propaganda from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s that came out of the Hearst newspaper group and that traveled east from California caused part of the problem. And I guess the hope is that it's also going to, our movement here, this movement here, is going to cause some solution, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah. And I mean, I think that some estimates are saying that cannabis is going to be $7 billion next year in tax revenues for the state. So I think that we might even see it jump up. The way that the emergency regs are going to be rolled out, though, that $7 billion figure, I mean, I don't know if people are basically going to be trickling into legality, right? They're going to be approving your permit and your license, and then the taxes are going to be starting to be required to be paid.
Right.
And so we'll see that as they approve them, they're not going to be all approved instantly. So I don't necessarily see $7 billion in 2018 the way it's been projected. But I do see that, by 2019, we are going to see that this is a huge industry. I think that we even have conservative numbers at $7 billion. I mean, I don't think that there's a general understanding of how much Trinity County is actually producing, right?
Or Humboldt or Mendocino, yeah.
I mean, and that's literally like 1/3 of our state, right? And in terms of landmass, so I think that we're going to be seeing that there's a lot coming in from cultivation that we didn't necessarily expect. And in addition, dispensaries in general, there's thousands of them in California. So we're going to definitely see that I believe there's going to be a lot more money than $7 billion, but probably we won't see that tax revenue until 2019.
At least, yeah. And here's hoping that the state legislature puts that into education. And let's hope that's where the money funnels into.
We know where the money's actually funneling into.
Oh,
that's business and no, not business. It's the tax code, and it's 34019, I believe, tax code.
Okay.
And they break it down how they're going to be dispensing the money. Essentially, we know that they're going to be putting tens of millions of dollars into grants, and that will be administered by the governor's office. And they are available for education, but our locality will have to go and seek that money out. Where we will find that money easier to come in is by taxing and regulating at a local level.
Which brings us back to the discussion concerning Alameda permitting cultivation and distribution here on the island.
Yeah, and we definitely, I'm a product of Alameda Unified School District, so
As am I.
Yeah, and I've always been very passionate. I actually, Mr. Gorham hated me actually, but I actually did.
So the listeners know Mr. Gorham is the faculty advisor for Encinal High School's audio video department, where we have our studios. So we're literally sitting right next to his office while we're having this interview.
He was actually my history teacher at Lincoln Middle School, and at the time they were, I know, right? And at the time our teachers were not getting paid what they needed to, and I've always been, kind of the social justice person. I was raised in a strong labor family, so I had organized a walkout at Lincoln Middle School, and literally every single student walked out onto and I was originally supposed to be suspended, but in lieu of suspension, I had to do 100 hours of community service garbage pickup, which it's like literally just on campus, so it's not really community service. I'm just walking around with a bag. Yeah, this is funny. We're off topic a little bit, but so I've always been a little bit more of an activist, and I don't know really why I brought that up. I lost my direction.
No, it's all right. We're in the school that brings up memories. I graduated Alameda High. I went to Wood. I'm product of the Alameda Unified School District. I was on the school newspaper at Alameda High, and I created all sorts of trouble too. So I'm right there with you.
I guess that we're tying it back in. I kind of had forgotten where I was coming from, but
Sure.
I really wanted money to be going to the schools in Alameda Island cannabis communities. When we had a list of demands or requests, I would say, because I don't want to demand too much with this. I feel like we did amazing.
We didn't take anybody hostage, so there's no demands.
I know, right? I mean, but so we wanted the money the tax revenues to be captured into community benefit funds, so it doesn't all go into public safety. Of course, I think that public safety needs to be getting some of this money, but I'm very nervous that I've been having a really hard time with the council getting them on board with a community benefit fund, and that is so pivotal in this whole thing. I know that over 80% of our budget goes to public safety, and I think that that's something that we really need to kind of take a hard look at, especially because now that we regulated, law enforcement is eligible for law enforcement grants, right? So we don't need a lot of additional money going to public safety. I think that it needs to be going to programs like APC, right? The Alameda Point Collaborative, which is it's a homeless shelter. They have their community garden. I mean, it's an amazing program. I think that it needs to go to like homeless and workforce housing. I think that it needs to go to our schools, and of course, I think that it needs to go to public safety as well. But I think that we should be asking them very specifically how, like the state has delved out, how they have separated, how they're planning on using their tax dollars and their tax revenue. We should be pushing our locality to do the same thing. We need to be asking Alameda City Council, hey, where is this money going to be going? I mean, we're only anticipating, I think, probably $1 million this first year. The projections were anywhere from $800,000 to $1.6 million, but what we decided to regulate here kind of dampened that number down to probably, my projection is about $1 million. But that is still some money. That is some money. And I think that if we put that into law enforcement, that's paid $92,000 a year, instantly that money just kind of disappears for 10 employees. And I think that it might be a little bit better used in our school districts and for these social programs.
Especially seeing as how last note that I saw, Alameda Unified School District teachers are paid somewhere on the order of $36,000 a year. So it does show a radical misdirection of priority that the group of people trying to prevent children from going to prison are being paid 1/3 the amount of the people who are putting people in prison. That calculus seems to support the whole gateway from school to prison, or that whole discussion there. But I don't want to get too deep into that one.
No, yeah.
But it does help kind of segue us over to another part of the conversation I want to get to, and that is, where did you feel support and opposition from the community? And to bring it back around to the reason for the show is, how did faith-based community efforts land on the spectrum of support or opposition?
Well, actually, we didn't really have a huge faith-based opposition here, and that is not true for a lot of different municipalities, right? They normally come out and they are, especially with some of the historical black churches, right, where the drug war really has impacted them, and so it's almost more understandable than from some of these other communities, and so that's a really interesting situation on its own. And in terms of support and opposition, let me just backtrack a little bit. Before I decided to take this bull by the horns, I did my research. I was in opposition research for only about 6 months after I graduated Cal, because I knew that I needed to be in cannabis. But I did a lot of research, and 68.8% of Alamedans voted in favor of cannabis legalization, AMA, in November of 2016, which I felt was absolutely, I mean, I was astounded. Yeah, it was like that's 2/3. I mean, that's absolutely amazing. And then a part of the consultant that the city hired to do research on how we would implement it, to kind of give council, there was a staff report that was requested, and they referred it basically to a consultant that understood a lot more than our city staff did. And a part of that was a poll, and 62% of Alamedans were okay with there being a dispensary in their neighborhood, and which I was also floored about. And I don't think that anybody should be afraid, but I'm also worried about that stigma. Sometimes people are like, yeah, I think that this should be legalized, but NIMBY, not my backyard.
Yeah, not my backyard, exactly.
And I mean, Frank Matarisi actually quoted this a lot. I think that the issue is always going to be his position was that there was going to be issues when they can approve it, they can zone it, they can say that this business belongs in this area. But from his perspective, he was pretty much thinking that when the community, the neighbors, found out what was going to go on, he felt like there was going to be a huge backlash. And I think that 62% says maybe not so much, right? Right. And, as we both grew up here, this is actually completely different than anything, I've ever seen or thought about our community. I never thought that this would happen. I mean, we just banned cultivation in January of 2016. So I was kind of floored about the whole thing, and I was actually really thinking, man, I think our community is actually way ahead of the game, and I think that there's propaganda that's been going on in our own city, that we are afraid of law enforcement to some degree, because there's always, there was this whole thing about, people driving over the over the bridge and getting pulled over, and this whole outsider type mentality.
There was a bit of tribalism on the island.
And I don't know if that's really all that true. I think that there is a very loud spoken 5% of people that are very loud. And I think we see that actually in a lot of different localities and jurisdictions across the state. So that being said, I think that Alameda's in a different place than we all thought they were.
Certainly. Going back out to the state level a little bit here, the California Catholic Conference. All sorts of fun folk at that conference, I'm sure. It was a hootenanny. Has issued several reports on cannabis legislation with a vast array of inaccuracies. Misleading or suggestive scare tactics and fear-mongering using techniques and language that reminds me of the reefer madness propaganda. You're seeing that ill of society rear its ugly head again, this time through, under the auspices of the Catholic Church. So what do you do to confront or combat these attempts to mislead the public and undermine the science and progressive social policy that we have been seeing slowly develop over the past few decades?
So I was also working out in Kern. I have a client that's out in Kern County, and
That's Central California.
Yes, yeah, and it's very they're very, very conservative there.
Agricultural.
Agricultural for sure, but the faith-based community really was coming out in clear opposition. A lot of similar things, right, where they're using the same repeated historical propaganda and just in a different cloak. I think that the biggest argument is people that they normally serve, right, are the people. Their congregation has a tendency to be of color and be of a lower economic status regardless of color. And these are the people that are filling up our prisons for simple possession. And once you start educating these people on an individual level, it really kind of opens up their eyes, right? Originally, faith-based churches out in Oakland were very much against this because of the damages that it has done to their community. But then when we realize that we're regulating, we are not locking these people up anymore for this. They're like, wait, there's not this criminal record now, right? And you just kind of have to get them to open their eyes, and it is really a challenging thing. I mean, faith-based can be very, they have their beliefs, they have their convictions, and it could be very hard to, even with common sense. I don't want to get into anything because I'm not super religious myself, but even with common sense policies, it can be very hard to sway them on their beliefs.
Yeah, I try desperately not to use the term closed-minded when describing religious organizations. However, when it comes to topics like cannabis, where it's been prohibited by the church for centuries because it offered what the church felt was a separate path to God. You could either pray and get this slice of euphoria from the prayer, or you could smoke this herb and get a bigger slice of
euphoria and clarity. And and I think that that's also something to be said too. I mean, I'm definitely for medical use. I started this because of the medical perspective, and even my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and by the grace of God, he's actually this month actually marked 4 years cancer free. So next year he'll be cancer free for sure.
Nice.
And yeah. So there, but I also think that there's a lot of social value in cannabis, right? I mean, what happens if you don't want to drink, right? I mean, I think that everybody can pretty much agree that smoking cannabis, you're not going to be out on the street running, being loud and disruptive in your community. I think that it is a little bit more of a safer thing than alcohol in general. So I kind of want to throw that out there. As much as I represent the medical side of things, I also acknowledge the cultural and social values that cannabis can offer a community as well.
Sure. And this also brings around another part of it. When you're talking about the medical benefits, the social benefits, there are reasons that religion has prohibited marijuana on both sides of that. The medical side, as we talked, the euphoria, the association with prayer that is considered anathema to, you have to go through the church to get that feeling. You don't get it from anything else. But it's also, there has been a history of persecution of healers, of naturalists, of naturopaths, of people who use herbology in their medical practice, like midwives, like shaman, if you want to call, however you want to describe the native indigenous population of North America, whether that be the Hopi Indian, the Apache. I mean, go through the list and you'll find native tribes that have had a very close connection to herbology and the earth, because that's what they had. It was the means. So when you demonify these cultures, you're doing it by demonifying the means by which they use to live their lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's actually a really interesting concept. And I think that you're way more of an expert than I am on this. I mean, when it comes to religious studies, I've never taken any kind of class, but I do see the way that the church has intersected themselves like they do with anything else, that yes, you have to go to your especially with the Catholic Church, right? You have to go to your priest to confess. You can't have that time to yourself to do your confessions and deal with your own your own higher being if you have one, right? And I think that that's definitely, we see the same thing translated into cannabis. And I think that there's a lot of spiritual value that comes from cannabis as well. There's a connection, right, that a lot of people do feel when they have a little smoke or a little piece of an edible, right? We're a little bit more understanding of each other, and I think that that's something that should not go unnoticed.
Now, we're seeing a lot of kind of how do I want to put this? A lot of cultural representation by way of identity politics.
Oh, definitely.
All right. This is something that's becoming a hallmark of political discussion in the United States. And as an atheist, I kind of fit into one of those definitions or one of those identities. I'm a white male in my early 40s. I don't have any other identity that is of the social justice movement other than perhaps my feminism, perhaps my considerations on the cannabis front, which brings me to the question of, do people who support cannabis see themselves as part of a cannabis movement? Or is this more of, we're just Americans trying to help other Americans and we don't want to be identified in a movement? How do you self-identify as a structure of activism?
Well, when I started in cannabis, it was a movement, right? It was a movement. It was very grassroots. It was, pushing local legislation, making the state at least acknowledge what's going on locally. And now there has been an influx of a lot of money, right? I mean,
sure.
It's totally turned into an industry literally before my eyes while I was working, right?
Right.
And I mean, that's an influx of, a lot of white male money coming from the East Coast, where places they don't have the dispensary model, right? And I think that there is a lot to be said about, your intersectionality in cannabis. And I think that that's a huge thing too. I mean, but we look at it, what's really odd is the polarity, duality, of the experience of the white male versus the black male. Right?
Oh, most certainly.
Yeah, and
I would still be in jail if I got caught for half the stuff that I pulled. And my friends from high school who were of Asian and Spanish or Hispanic origin, or even African American, they would have to deal with things in a completely different way than I would. And I didn't even realize that was the situation until much later when I worked on a documentary about this. And I'm looking at these guys, I'm like, God, this guy was born on, one person in particular I remember, he was born on the same day I was, in the same hospital. We grew up 6-7 miles apart. He was in San Leandro, I was here. And for the exact same thing I did, marijuana possession, this guy was sent up for 17 years.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, and this is a really important discussion that's even going on in Oakland right now. There's they're having an equity, what they're referring to like an equity permit process, where they're going to be, they looked pretty heavily into which police beats were more negatively impacted by the war on drugs. And I believe that they found that there's 2 police beats. And essentially the idea is, while these white men who owned these dispensaries were selling massive amounts, I mean, for some of these dispensaries, especially in Oakland, I mean, they're pulling in millions of dollars, serious money, and people in these beats were getting seriously incarcerated with seriously hefty crimes, right,
for doing the exact same thing that's happening like 20 feet away in that building,
and on a such smaller scale, right? I mean, not to say, but I just don't believe that somebody who has 7 sacks needs to be going to jail in a way when literally somebody has a brick and mortar selling many ounces a day. So the minority the equity program is really important. Hood Incubator is one of those people that are trying to help the equity applicants navigate through the very, very complicated permit process. And I believe that there's been some discussion at the state level, but it's been a little bit different because state hasn't actually licensed it. you know, and without saying anything, I think it's really important to recognize that we have that dichotomy where it's like these people are going to jail while these people are allowed to make the money. And because the state hasn't said these white people were allowed to make the money, it's going to be a little bit of a different push. But we see that also happening in Richmond. I believe that Sacramento just announced that they're going to be doing an equity applicant program as well. And I know that in Oakland, for every one regular applicant, they're going to be doing one equity applicant. So intersectionality in cannabis is to not be overlooked. It's, I mean, especially with the war on drugs, it's something that needs to be heavily looked at.
Well, and this we're coming to the close of the show here in a little bit, so I want to kind of make this the last point we discuss. Is there any discussion about kind of undoing the damage that's been done to these people's lives by, if we're going to make if we make cannabis legal recreationally, then all the people who are in jail for using cannabis recreationally are now in jail for something that's now legal. At what point do we look at the absurdity of keeping someone in jail, the cost, the not only cost to the person in the jail cell, but to the people, us, paying for that person in the jail cell? Where do we look at that and say, okay, let them out, maybe expunge their record, and help them reintegrate and kind of put something better in its place, so a better situation for these people's lives?
Yeah, there's a couple different things that are currently being worked on. To begin with, AMA, the adult use that we passed in November, literally, despite what a lot of people think, the next morning you woke up and cannabis was legal. A lot of laws do not do that. They wait until January 1st when they have
I thought it wasn't until January 1st of 2018.
That's actually the cities. Basically, the cities had until January 1st, 2018 to permit, or the state can come in and kind of do their own thing.
Okay.
Literally, the next morning, you could not be arrested for possession. Granted, that is not necessarily what happened with communities of color.
Yeah, no kidding.
But expunging your record the next day. I mean, I've been helping out one of my friends that was, you know, he had a simple possession charge. He lives in Oakland, not necessarily in one of those beats, but yes, he was able to start his expunging process in January. And I think that they're still kind of working on some things, but he's looking to have his record cleaned from just his possession charge. And that's something that really is important, and that's a part of the equation. And another way to address it is by making sure that our city is filing for these grants for job placement. There is going to be job placement grants that are available through the governor's office. We were talking about the grants earlier.
Sure.
And I think that it takes a multi-pronged effort. We can't just expunge somebody's record and act like they didn't lose these years or these months, whatever it was. They didn't lose their job. Like, you know, we need to kind of acknowledge that they were out of society for a while, and it is harder to reintegrate back into society, which is where we get recidivism from, you know?
Incredibly more difficult. And but in this whole conversation, it seems to me that the error was on the side of the state for making it illegal to begin with. Definitely. It seems that the responsibility, the onus for expunging these records should be on the state, because they're the ones that caused the problem to begin with. And we now have kind of a better moral perspective than we did in the past. We understand the racism, the hatred, the bigotry, the negative of the war on drugs, and we're trying to solve that through our laws. It seems like the least
we could do.
The least we could do is kind of make it so that these people don't have to jump through even more hoops to fix a problem that was created by...
Yeah, I mean, if my friend had more money, right, the friend that I've been helping out, if he had more money, he could have hired a lawyer to do all this, and I'm sure it would be done, like, just taken care of. And I think that that's also something that we need to acknowledge, right, that the people that are being the victims of the war on drugs typically are lower income, and the opportunity for them to expunge, it's so much more difficult. They have, you know, it's really hard, and making sure that we have at least funding for maybe... what is the lawyer firm that's a nonprofit in Oakland? Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. But there's really great programs where these people can go to, but they're already strapped. You know, and it's like now we've got a bunch of people that can get expunged. They're even more strapped than they were before. Granted, they, you know, can kind of, you know, take care of things, but it's just going to take a really long time for them to do it. And I mean, that's once again, it's part of the, you know, that's very much a part of like the you know, the racially based social structure that we have, and the class-based social structure that we have.
And you're also talking about a whole collection of people who are currently serving time for marijuana offenses that are no longer offenses. They're no longer. So what about releasing people from prison and saving that money?
Well, yeah, let's get them, and that's part of that. Once again, totally right about the state being responsible, because from inside, now they have to contact their public defender,
right?
And try to get that. And it's absolutely, it's a cluster headache. It's a cluster headache.
Nice.
But yeah, it's like it's definitely a huge issue, and we can always do more. And I think that there's definitely need to be more active around that. I know that the Hood Incubator has been discussing their next steps after they finish helping these equity applicants permit in Oakland. So hopefully we'll see them move into that trajectory as well.
That would be nice. Well, I want to say thank you so very much for your time today. I always love having discussions with people who know stuff I don't, so I can kind of learn, but also just kind of commiserate over, yes, there's somebody else out there that says the same things and knows the same things and goes the same direction I am. So thank you so very much for coming on today.
No, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And you're definitely more of a religion expert than I am, so that's really
I never tried to be.
I know, but I think that's really valuable, and I really appreciated the conversation. It's really nice to have a conversation with somebody who understands historical implications and social stigmas in our current day. So
thank you so very much. You have been listening to Talk Like an Atheist. We have had this wonderful conversation with Sharon Golden of the Alameda Island Cannabis Community. My name is B.W. Ellis. Usually here on Sunday evenings and then again on Thursday nights. Feel free to visit the website talklikeanatheist.com or find me on Facebook. Just search for Talk Like an Atheist. I'm kind of the only one there with that title. And I will look forward to talking to you again. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Alameda Community Radio. Our government is in a state of shutdown. This radio station is designed to provide you with a voice. Listen to what our government has to say and respond accordingly.
Thank you for calling the White House. Unfortunately, we cannot answer your call today because congressional Democrats are holding government funding, including funding for our troops and other national security priorities, hostage to an unrelated immigration debate. Due to this obstruction, the government is shut down. In the meantime, you can leave a comment for the president at www.whitehouse.gov/contact. We look forward to taking your calls as soon as the government reopens.
Thank you for listening to KACR-LP, Alameda's Community Radio, 96.1 on your FM dial. Contact us at AlamedaCommunityRadio.org and donate.